So I'm Deb Delaney and I'm an IMAS researcher doing a PhD on bull kelp or Davilia patatarum based here on King Island.
What made you ever decide to go that path?
That's a good question, Wade. I think because, well, one, my partner's involved in the industry, so I had listened to him talking about the changes that he was experiencing over very many years. I was also seeing the impacts myself, and I had been working in the natural resource management sector for very, very many years, and I thought, well, I've got the skill sets to actually do this, and so here I am basically. So I approached IMAS, so I deliberately wanted to do it with IMAS because they're world-renowned research in marine environments. So approached IMAS with a project proposal, and 12 months later I started a PhD.
What are the changes? Because you say we're seeing changes.
So I've got 4 components to my research. So the first part is what. So what has the change been over the time since 1975? So we've got 50 years of data, which is astronomical. It's really rare to have 50 years of data. So I'm tracking what that change has been, so where it used to be versus now, and the abundance, like how much bull kelp did there used to be versus now, and what's that change look like over that 50-year time period. Off to the side of that is the project that both Jody and Stuart are doing, where they're looking at in-water changes. So I'm mapping the changes within the sector, within the fishery itself, so bull kelp's part of the fishery. My second chapter is primarily about how's that affected people. What does it mean? What does it mean if we're losing these sorts of species? What does it mean from a socio-economic factor? What does it mean to a population like King Island? Third chapter is why. So you were asking before around changes in sea surface temperatures, changes in swell. That's what my third chapter will really look into and dive deep into that, particularly marine heat waves and also winter temperatures, because bull kelp breeds in winter. It has a male and a female plant, so quite different to other species. And then my fourth will look at what does it mean for the future. So that's sort of a summary of what I'm doing over the time of my PhD.
Now, we often hear when research is done that by the end of the day then decisions are made at government level. Hey, stop fishing here. No, crayfishing can only be done for a certain time of the year. With kelp, you can't control, can you?
No. And we're quite unique in that. Like globally, there's not many that do cast seaweed. Like seaweed as a fishery globally is really rapidly expanding, but it's rapidly expanding into aquaculture, and there's some wild harvest, but you're quite correct, we're based on wild populations out of the ocean, so it's whatever's going on in there is affecting the industry.
So what are you hoping to achieve with the outcome of all this research? That we have a better overview, I guess, but then, what can we do or how can we change?
Yeah, firstly, what's happened is really to understand what has happened and why, and then, what can we do? Is there some adaptations that we can do locally, or what does it mean for the future of the industry? Is it the conversion to aquaculture, or is it going to high value yields rather than alginates? All of those questions remain unanswered at this particular point in time, but maybe there's some other options there that we could look at given the decline that's happened.
Options like?
Maybe we go into a different sector of the market. I don't know at this particular point. Like I said, they remain unanswered at this particular time. But pharmaceuticals are high value, so maybe there's some options around there. Who knows?
We mentioned changes. Is one of the biggest changes now over those 50 years is there less kelp? Simple? Is that the biggest change?
There's a couple of things that, and like I said, I don't want to speculate at this particular point, but some of the things that I'm starting to see in my first chapter is significant change in the amount of kelp, like very significant change. Also a change in distribution, so we're not getting so much kelp to the north of the island anymore. Most of it seems to be from Curry to the south of the island in terms of where they're able to collect it from. And then also one of the things that we're looking at, which is probably more into Stu's research, is changes in weight and length, those types of metrics in terms of what's going on with the actual kelp itself, which is part of the reason Stu's come on board to do that as a honours project.
Coming on board, what made you decide to bring them out here to do? Well, they will talk about it in a minute when we chat to them, but what was the whole idea about it?
I've got enough work to do as it is with doing the on-land stuff. So, and plus don't have the scuba capabilities. So we wanted to do some in-water assessments as well, because it's one thing to say what's going on in terms of change from a fishery point of view, but it's also let's have a look at what's happening in populations in the water and see where they're at and what's going on, and whether they're changing in the water, or is it swell? Is it because the swells change? So it's part of that, being able to answer the why, what's happening.
Well, let's hear what they have to say. Thanks for your time.
No worries.
Go first.
I'm Stuart, and I'm researching kelp with the Institute of Marine and Antarctic Studies.
I'm Jody. I'm a master's student, also researching kelp at the Institute of Marine and Antarctic Studies.
What happened one day you said to yourself, I'm going to study kelp? Now, I'm wondering, how do you get to studying kelp? Jody, start with you.
That's a really good question. I feel like I've just always been really interested in it. I feel like it plays a really important role in the marine ecosystems all along southern Australia. I feel like it doesn't quite get the same sort of limelight as like corals and stuff that are maybe a little bit more pretty, but they're still just as important in the marine ecosystem. So I feel like I've always been really interested in them.
Yeah, I've been working on and playing in the ocean for as long as I can remember, and just seemed like a natural thing to do next was to start to study it and learn how to appreciate it better. And kelp is a really important part of the Tasmanian ecosystem, and it just seemed a natural thing to do next. So yeah, really excited to study it.
Do people don't even realise what kelp is used for, do they?
No, they don't tend to, I feel. It kind of gets a little bit forgotten about, perhaps. But yeah, it can be used for a whole range of things, as we can see here.
Yeah, give us a bit of a breakdown. What do you think they use it for?
Yeah, well, we've heard the kelp used here in King Island is used, like the alginate product is used, and it can be used in like a suite of things from pharmaceuticals to products in like beer and toothpaste. And then it goes through to being used maybe in like households, as some people starting to use to cook with it. And then I think it's also like it's used in a human setting, but then the use in the environment and the ecosystem is probably what I'm like really interested in. And that's just, yeah, the wide array of seaweed and how it's used by the environment is, still learning every day, and it's just amazing. So I feel like, yeah, that's probably.
So tell us a little bit about, whoever starts, your specific work, the research that you do. Give us a bit of an insight.
The specific work I've been doing on King Island has been from Cape Wickham down to Stokes Point, and it's been looking at in-water biomass, or the amount of bull kelp that's there, and that's been through surveys and trying to do biomass estimates, and that's in conjunction with collaborating historical data and current data to try and get an understanding of the relationship of harvestable kelp and kelp underwater. So we've spent a lot of time snorkeling, a lot of time counting and moving and looking at kelp, but it's been an intense few weeks in the field here. Yep.
And my research is basically replicating the work that was done by Anthony Cheshire here on King Island in the 1980s. So he basically did some in-water surveys looking at the morphology and demography of bull kelp. And the aim behind my project is to replicate these surveys, so looking at sites around Fitzmaurice and Curry, measuring the bull kelp, obtaining these morphological characteristics, and then seeing if there's any changes that have occurred since when Anthony did his work in the 1980s to now.
You're pretty sure there have been changes?
We can't really make any conclusions on that yet, as we haven't really been able to have a deep dive into the data. But yeah, it would be really interesting to find out if we do see any changes.
All we hear is about climate change and the world is changing. Do you guys as researchers see changes happening already in, I guess, early stages even of your career, but there's changes happening in our ocean, in our waters?
Yes, definitely. I feel like there's a lot of research going on at the moment, looking at changes that are happening all around the world. So things like oceans warming, ice melting, species moving to places that they weren't previously. So it's a really big field of research at the moment that people are really looking into, just to try and understand all of these changes that are happening.
And what about the kelp? Do we see lots of changes there? Or?
Yeah, well, I guess that's some of our focus on King Island, is looking at how the kelp's changed, and it potentially could be to climate change. And we hear a lot of like historical accounts of different types of kelp that used to be as far as the eye could see, and then now it's not even present. So there's definitely been some change to the kelp, and it's yeah, that's kind of part of the reason we're here on King Island researching.
Yeah, and what changes do we see? Is there noticeable changes? Less kelp, but quality of kelp, size of kelp?
On King Island specifically, or just broadly?
On King Island for the moment?
Yeah, well, we haven't really, anecdotally, there's been some reports of there being less kelp. And I guess, yeah, part of our research is to try and investigate that and find out if there is less kelp, if it's being found in places that it hasn't found, if it's, reducing its range that it lives in. But yeah, we're not able to sort of come to any sort of conclusions yet. We're still sort of figuring it out and doing all this research. And
is kelp on King Island different than, say, kelp in other places of Tasmania, or is there a bigger abundance of kelp here, or what's the story?
Well, yeah, it's hard for us to know the differences because we're just like in a very early phase, and we still have to look at all our data, so I don't want to speculate. But yeah, King Island's definitely unique as it's got roaring winds and big swells, and it's like an island in Bass Strait. So from our observations, the kelp grows differently here, or looks different here, and kelp's it's not the same as what I've seen in the rest of Tasmania. But yeah.
So how do you see your research in kelp now as part of a bigger research? Because I'm sure it is part of an overall research, isn't it, for the future?
yeah, so I feel like it just kind of adds to the whole understanding of figuring out how different species may respond to potentially changing environmental conditions, possibly a result of climate change. Again, we're not really sure. We're still in the really early stages of this research, so we can't make any solid conclusions just yet. But yeah, it just sort of feeds into the whole knowledge of trying to figure out how species around the world may be affected.
Tell us about King Island. Is it different going underwater here? It's like different than, say, Xi'an or Hobart or St Helens or wherever you go in the water? Or?
Yeah, I think it's definitely unique. I feel like we've noticed a lot of differences. It's slightly warmer here, which is really nice. It? Yeah, a little bit. I think so.
It would be colder.
Yeah, a little bit warmer. We have noticed a couple of species looking slightly different than they do on mainland Tasmania, which is quite interesting to see.
So what's next now after King Island? Are you going to work on all this research, or the things that you've done here on the island? What's going to happen?
Yeah, after our time on King Island, we'll be based back down in Hobart and spend the remainder of this year looking at all the data we've collected, and then reading and researching other papers from around the world, and then putting that all together. And hopefully by the end of the year we have a paper or a research project we can then share with everybody, with the aim of answering some questions around bull kelp on King Island.
So what is more fun, sitting behind the desk doing all that work, or being here and underwater?
All of it. It's all fun. Maybe the underwater bits are slightly more fun. But yeah, you got to do it all. So research.
Well, all together here, guys, thank you very much. Had a listen to what it's all about with the kelp. I guess you need a lot of support with this too, Deb.
Absolutely. Firstly, research wouldn't be happening if IMAS wasn't willing to be involved and to supervise the research, and that's an amazing contribution. The Blue Economy Cooperative Research Centre, so I'm part of that Cooperative Research Centre, which is a national research centre, so I'm a student within that. The Centre for Marine Socioecology is also involved, and I cannot forget NRE, so state government has actually contributed significant funds to enable the operational costs of all of this work, so they've funded all of our operational costs.
Yeah, and then on the ground on King Island, Kelp Industries has been instrumental in facilitating us and having us here looking at kelp in the factory. And then flowing on from that, I'd really like to thank all the carters who we've talked to or spoke to and got local information about conditions, and their excitement to be involved has been really great.
And then finally, we would also like to thank Tas Ports for sending our car and gear over to King Island that enabled us to do all of our work. And we'd also like to thank Jim Cooper and Karen Taplin for offering us their beautiful accommodation for us to stay while we were spending our time here on King Island.